Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Dr. Lopkin, maybe 20 years after the turnover, looks like Hong Kong is back in the news, isn't it?
It really is. Hong Kong was turned over to mainland China by the UK back in 2000. And one of the things that was agreed upon was a 50-year guarantee of Hong Kong's rights. And mainland China seems to be going back on that. So there are massive protests, and that's actually having a major impact on both the global economy and our trade war with China.
How does it affect the trade war?
Well, the protesters have actively been seeking our help. You've probably seen on the news, they're holding American flags, they're singing the Star Spangled Banner, they're trying to put pressure on China to make them free like we are, and at the same time they're imploring us for help.
Just like almost Tiananmen Square 30
Yes.
years ago.
It's very reminiscent of Tiananmen Square.
So, very interesting. Let's look at the reality. There's really nothing anyone can do about it, correct? I mean, obviously the UK, they're going to invade China. That ain't going to happen. What could happen? What's preventing China from doing what the hell they want to do?
Well, there is a legal agreement between them and the UK. So they have, the UK can actually take action in World Court, whatever legal things they have. Do I think that's going to affect China, or that China's even going to budge on that? No, I think China would basically hold their ground in face of anything short of an actual war, and nobody wants to go that far.
Agreed. So how do you think this ends up economically, politically, geopolitically?
Honestly, I think short term it's going to go on, as the status quo. China did back down a little bit, but not that much. Ultimately, I think Hong Kong is going to have a civil war and attempt to declare independence.
And China's not going to accept that.
China's not going to accept that, but if they start going in with troops, the international community will move against them.
I think it would have severe economic ramifications
for
China, which is very interesting, Dr. Lopkin, because when you look at it, they were considered infallible. You know what I'm saying? Like they were it was already preordained. They were going to take over us. There's a lot of kinks in their armor. I mean, if they invade Hong Kong, their trade relations with the West is finished for not forever, because I realize things change, but for 5-10 years.
Well, China made some bad assumptions, and one of them was that they were going to be able to be the world's supply chain. Well, since Trump put the tariffs in place, almost every major company has started moving their supply chains out of China. They're moving them into India, they're moving into Korea and Vietnam. So China no longer has that economic backstop. Their growth has slowed tremendously. They can't rely on the EU as trading partners because the EU is heading into a recession. So,
and beyond the EU, beyond the recession aspect, Europe is a declining entity. I mean, I read a book in 1995, and it was basically who was going to be the world's economic power, written by the head of MIT, by the way, business department. And it was obviously, I think it was China, Japan, United States, and the EU. He predicted the EU. It almost sounds comical now. My point is, I think Europe overall, militarily and economically, except for maybe Germany, is not what it used to be. We'll just leave it at that.
Even Germany's not what it used to be. Germany for last quarter had negative GDP. They actually had a bond sale today where they are trying to sell German government bonds. The problem is their interest rates are so low that if you buy these bonds, you actually get less money than you're paying them.
Yeah, I think it's not even short term. I just think that, I guess, getting right to the point, I think overall Europe is a declining entity, and they'll play less of a role in the world economically and politically. Do you agree?
Yeah, they've been on the decline for a while, and actually that works in our favor. Everybody has been worried economically about a hard Brexit for the UK. But if the UK leaves the EU without any kind of trading agreement, they almost by default become the United States' largest trading partner. And they
Oh,
need a
no
lot
question.
of things imported because they cannot, make them on the small island. So it works out better for the United States and makes us even less reliant on China's economy.
Interesting. It's funny how things can change in a very short period of time. The next topic in the world stage, in the world news, is Russia. Maybe you want to comment on that and their nuclear situation.
Yeah, Russia well, Putin had made a comment several weeks ago about having a brand new weapon that could evade all of the US defenses. Well, that weapon blew up in their faces, literally, leaving a
Oh
cloud of radiation,
my God.
killing off 5 of their nuclear scientists. What's worse is that 4 of the radiation centers that monitor radiation went dark. Russia is trying to hide the extent of the damage, and they've thrown regulators out, they've thrown international monitors out, they're not reporting data. So the only assumption that people can make is that the explosion was even worse than we had assumed.
What does it mean?
Honestly, it's again good for the United States because it shows the Russian military capability is not what we thought it was. And Putin is now facing repercussions at home. He's losing power in Russia.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I think the problem with Russia is it's hard to have a strong military when you don't have a strong economy. I think that's really the takeaway.
Yes,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's huge, and yes, they're going to be continuing to decline, which is good and scary at the same time. To close, I would like your opinion, Dr. Lopkin. There's a Fox poll that shows almost, or at least the top 5, 6 Democratic candidates beating Trump in 2020. I don't quite believe it. What do you think?
And now there have been a couple of polls that said that, but these are also the same polls that said Hillary Clinton was going to win the White House. They don't take into account Trump supporters because Trump supporters don't talk to these pollsters. So there's a big gap between the people who are actually going to vote and the people who are answering these polls.
I would agree with that. Do you think there's really anyone? First of all, I think Biden head to head, mano on mano with Trump, unless the economy tanks. I think that actually could be comical. I mean, he's getting worse and worse and worse.
The more they talk, the worse they're doing. And I don't think any of the current Democratic candidates could beat Trump. I think as it gets closer and closer and the primaries go on, their attacks on each other are going to split the mainstream Democrats from the left-wing Democrats. And whichever side loses the primary, they're not backing the opposing candidate. They're going to stay home.
I think that's a great analysis. And the last thing, it seems to be less discussion in the media about impeachment. What's going on with that?
Well, I mean, the main reason that there's not much going on with it is that Congress is on vacation. They're not in session.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
But honestly, for everything they've been doing, the people are sick of it. They've given up any chance of Congress impeaching him. So even the people who are in favor of impeachment are essentially going, all right, just move on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, Dr. Lopkin, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. Job well done once again, Dr. Lopkin.
See you next week.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week at exvadio.com/podcasts, on the iHeartRadio app, the Apple Podcasts app, the iTunes Store, Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. You can also catch us live every Friday at 4 on WESU FM 88.1.